Okay, so for the last type of mole calculations is to go from grams to molecules. So I like to remind students that, there's a progression that I teach this in. It's like we convert between moles and molecules. Before we do that, we learn how to add up the molar mass. And then we do this conversion back and forth. And then we go to molecules and moles. And if you noticed in that video, it really didn't matter what we had, because how many things in a mole is independent of what it is. It's like saying you have a dozen pencils or a dozen donuts or a dozen cars. We don't really care how much it weighs. It's just 12 things. And then and this one is the mole bridge. And then the next assignment is going to have mole mixed up, which is always harder because you have to analyze it and figure out which one we're trying to do. So for this one, have the setup here between we call this like the mole bridge. So if you're going from grams to number of atoms, you have to change it to moles. There's just no other way. So to go from grams to moles, you're dividing by the molar mass. And I like to set up with conversion factors because I like to just cancel them out. I don't like to memorize. I hate to memorize. And so I just use that method. Some people like this better. So this would be for those of you that like this better. If you're asking how many things, then you're going to be multiplying by Avogadro's number. Okay? And if I'm going in the opposite direction, they're giving me how many things here. To convert them to moles, I'm dividing by Avogadro's number. And then to go from moles to grams, I would be multiplying times the molar mass. So you can either use this type of roadmap, there's several different versions of this, to guide your calculations, or, like I like to do, I just get things to cancel out. Okay, so I'm going to do a couple examples for you to get you started, and then I will be posting a solution video later. Okay, so how many formula units? The formula units is the same thing as a molecule, just depends on how they're bonded, and I don't really care about that distinction for us here. Okay, so I'm starting with grams. Okay, so if I'm going grams to formula units, I'm going to have a two-part conversion here that I'm going to do. Okay, so I'm going to start with my 500. And the first conversion factor I'm going to use is going to have grams here and moles here. One is always married to the mole. All right, and that's going to give me moles. If my answer wanted to know how many moles, then I would stop right there, but it doesn't. It wants to know how many things I have. So I'm going to just use molecules, and Avogadro's number goes here. I don't really need to calculate anything for that because I know that number. But for this, for the PbCl2, for the mass, I need to look at my periodic table and get my masses. So my Pb is 207.2, and then my Cls are 35.45. Okay, very, very heavily based on calculations for this unit. But like I've told you before, this is the peak, and it actually goes downhill for the rest of the year. But we do use these all year long. So your effort is not wasted. It's 207.2. So I'm getting 278.10. Okay, so now that I have my setup, what I'm going to do, and you've heard me say this in the other videos, which it really didn't matter because there was only one calculation, but I'm going to multiply everything on the top and then divide it on the bottom. It just goes better with the calculator. If you go this divided by that and times that, sometimes your calculator is timesing these two and dividing it. They're not necessarily doing what you want it to do. So your calculator is a great tool, but it's not very smart. It's just going to do what you tell it to do. And so you don't want to confuse it. So my recommendation is to multiply everything on the top. So 500, I don't do the times 1, but I do Avogadro's number. So 500 times 6.02, second function, 23. And then I hit equals. I'm not going to write that down, but that's everything on the numerator side. Then I'm going to divide it by 278.1. And that's my answer. 1.082, because the 500 has 4 sig figs, times 10 to the 24th molecules. Okay, so this is one way to set up the mole bridge. Another way is the opposite direction, and that's if they give you molecules instead of grams. So if you look at the grams ones, this is going to be the same as number 2, number 4, number 5. Well, number 5 is asking you a different question. Which one has more atoms? And they're asking you to compare things, okay? But for the mole bridge, those are going to be similar. Now for calculating the mass of molecules, so for like number 3, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with this. So I'm starting at the other end of the bridge. And I can't cancel molecules with grams. So you'll notice all of my conversion factors have a mole in them. And the 1 is always in front of the mole in the conversion factor. And whenever you have how many things are in 1 mole, by definition, that's Avogadro's number. And since they asked me mass, I've got one more conversion factor to do. And I have to add up the mass of this. So 6 times 12.01 is 12 times 1.01. Okay, so I get 180.18 grams. Okay, so same thing as the other one. This is the hard part, setting it up. Making sure your molecules cancel, your moles cancel, and you've set it up correctly. Then you're going to multiply everything on the top, divided by what's on the bottom. So I've got 3.62, second function exponent, 24 times 180.18. Okay, and then I hit equals just to make sure it's going to do what I want it to do. And then I'm dividing by Avogadro's number. So divided by. And this is what I get, 1083.474. So 1080 grams will give me 3 sig figs. All right, so now it starts asking you a couple of other questions, not necessary classic mole bridge calculations, like which one has more atoms, 10 grams of this or that, and then 10 moles of this or that. Okay, and then some comparisons if you have this many moles of this or how many grams of that. Then you get to this table. This table is kind of a summary of all of our calculations. Now I put a box around the moles because really this is what you need to get to first. Okay, so I'm not going to talk too much about the first row. But like the second row and the third row, the first thing we need to do is change grams to moles and then record that. And then the second thing we need to do is convert them to the number of molecules or particles. For this one, I'm going to go from particles to moles. That's my first step. And then back to the number of grams. So the moles is really your go-to. You have to put them in moles first. And this one we already have it in moles, so we can go from moles there to moles there. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a good starting jump start. I'm going to give you some answers without work for this part. Okay, so here's some answers for you to check your work, but you know that what I wrote down for number 1 and number 3 is what I'm expecting to see for you to get credit for this worksheet. But this just kind of gives you an easy check to get started for answers without the work. And that's it for this part.